Welcome to Scott's Boring Life. I'm Scott. This is my podcast. Welcome to it. It's Wednesday, January 17th, 2021. And I'm just checking in on you to let you know I'm still here and I'm happy you're listening. This is the first time in the history of my podcast that I have more international listeners than Canadian. In fact, I have way more international than Canadian. I'm talking to you from Canada right now. Specifically, I want to say hello and address and honor my Indian listeners. I have way more people listening to me from India than I do in my home country. And that's kind of interesting because, you know what, my Indian friends, my friends from India, I have been there 20 years ago when I was 19 years old. I went on an adventure to Asia and was in India, in Rajasthan, for some time. And I want to tell you about that experience. And it was a great experience, one of the best of my life. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to thank the Indian people for listening. The whole purpose of this podcast, the whole reason I got into it, was for just this kind of thing. I really love that old friends listen and old coworkers and family, but reaching people across an ocean and some town that is so very different than mine, and, connecting with them and them with me, that is cool. So, this is a short podcast for you internationally, whether it's Russia or Belgium or somewhere in Britain or especially in India. This short podcast is for you. All right, let's do it. All right, let's talk about what we've been doing, and let's talk about where we're going with this podcast. Where we've been? Well, we just had an interview with Greg, and if you hadn't listened to that, please go back, and it's the episode right before this one. I had a great interview with a friend, Greg Rubadoo, who created a really cool rock and roll album. He's a PhD, interesting guy. And we had a great talk, so check that out if you haven't already. Where are we going? Well, I enjoyed that interview with Greg. How it was a little bit different is that I prepared. I mean, when I say I prepared, it wasn't a lot. I did the bare minimum. And holy shit, if you just do the bare minimum, things seem to go better. Yeah, maybe I should have done the bare minimum with this podcast because I don't have any notes, but that's okay because what I'm doing is I'm just checking in, and I would just want to recognize the international listeners, especially India. Maybe I'll go through country by country, but today we're specifically going to talk about India because I have an affection for the country and I have an affection for the people. I feel that the culture, the Indian culture and Western country culture, they get along well. They make good friends, and I think all cultures can, but some lend themselves more than others. And I think India and the Western world is a great example of that. India, I'm talking about the future is I would like to have a future podcast where I just talk about that trip I did to Rajasthan when I arrived in Mumbai and toured all of Rajasthan. And I would like to talk about that, but for respect for the listener and myself and the podcast, I'm going to wait because I'm going to prepare. Like I said, at least the bare minimum. Maybe even turn it into an interview with my buddy I traveled with. Buddies. It was Karen and Sean. So it was the three of us. It'd probably be smart if I had the interview with Karen because she was, I think, the one that probably facilitated most of the trip. And I was a little bit of a follower back then, but I could be forgiven. I was young, and the opportunity just kind of fell in my lap. And I was very lucky for it. The people in Rajasthan were cool, and I look forward to the podcast where we explore the different places and the people we met. What have I been doing? Just briefly, I of course it's the book, and if you've been keeping up with the podcast during this hopefully tail end of COVID, it's all about writing a book for me. And right now I'm at 65,000 words. I've lied to you in the past. I've exaggerated a little bit, just by a few thousand, but that's the honest truth. Is 65,000 words, and it's called Killer New App. When's it going to be done? I don't know at this point. It's done when it's done. I'm enormously proud of where it's going, and I think it's going to be a fairly long book, very dark and twisted, which I think is going to be my thing, which is all right. Writing every day really takes you can really assess yourself and what's going on, because it takes a lot and you really have to be optimal. And whenever I'm treating myself well, it seems to be that I get a lot more done. But every now and then you got to live, right? You have to let go. So we did that last week. It was fun. That letting go involved, I don't know, pizza and 6 beers, and it's COVID, so there's no party. So it's just my wife and I. Sometimes we'll have a party, just the two of us, play music, drink, be silly. And I enjoyed it. But boy, did I pay for it. Getting older, man. I'm 40. When I visited you in India, I was 19. I was a different guy. Different body anyway. And now, when I do, say the hell with it and drink and eat pizza and all that stuff, oh, do I pay for it? I think most people do. You get the tough guys that just say, oh, no, whatever. I don't know. I think they pay for it too. I'm not awesome at moderate drinking, I must admit. So that's a part of it. A night of drinking always ends up, for me, I don't know if you have this in India, but here, in my world, if I drink at night, the next day, I eat a breakfast sandwich. Emotionally, in my car. I drive into town, I get a breakfast sandwich, and in the parking lot, I eat it alone in my car. So there's someone in India that just listened to that, and I think they probably just tuned out. They're like, I don't care. Like I said, this is a short podcast, and if you're just somehow tuning in, they're a little bit more formulated and concise than you're hearing right now. I just want to check in quickly because I noticed that we have a larger international following, and I was excited, and I wanted to say hello. If you're a listener from India or anywhere else, and you want to be on this podcast, you want to talk to me, I would love to hear about your life, what it is like. Just talk about your day. We can talk about how your day starts and what happens all the way through and how it ends. It is enormously interesting, I assure you, even if you think maybe it isn't. and I would love to talk to you. Scott McKenzie 323 at gmail.com. And you could be on this podcast. And that goes for anybody, but especially right now because we're honoring our Indian listeners. So it goes to anybody, but especially I'm talking to you in India, whether it's Rajasthan or any other part of the country. When I think of India now, I kind of think of like, you take any city, and you get these parts of the city that are kind of up and coming. And that's where the cool restaurants are starting and the younger hip artists are moving. And that's where it's cool to be. And, it's just going to be better as the years go by. And that's where you find the people with that entrepreneurial energy, that the fire in the belly, the optimism. And it's a great energy in the cities, in these areas of the city. Every city has one. And I find in the world was a city. India's kind of like that part of town. It has a real entrepreneurial energy. It has a real fire in the belly. And that fire in the belly is an expression for optimism, drive. And I think there's going to be, the future is really bright and for countries like that. So we have on Scott's Boring Life here, I have an interview coming up with a man named Skylar Seal. And boy, oh boy, I don't know how I'm going to approach this one. He is a cool guy. I've known him longer than I've known Greg, since grade school. And Skylar's not afraid to tell you all about him, his personal struggles with addiction, things like that. And this is no joke, man. This will be an interesting one. I'm really wrestling with how I want to approach this interview. A little bit trickier to formulate than an interview like I did with Greg, which is about, a 3-song rock album. So just tune into that one, and I believe that will be next Wednesday, where that will be posted. I don't know how that's going to go. I'm apprehensive. I want to do it right, to respect Skylar and you, the listener, wherever you are in the world. Now, I appreciate you, and I know there's probably with everybody's going through the same thing right now with COVID, and life is nuts for everybody. And, it's going to be all right. In fact, it's going to be great. All great things start with struggle. And, there's been a little bit of struggle, hasn't there? And the 20s, the roaring 20s, the 2020s are going to be great for you and all of us. And this is how it starts. All right. So you're listening, and I appreciate it. You want to be on the podcast, I'd love to talk to you wherever you are in the world, but especially to India. And just give me an email, Scott McKenzie 323 at gmail.com. Whether you've done something extraordinary or you've just living your life, man, it's cool. Want to hear about it? Give me an email. All right. This is the short podcast on this Wednesday in February 17th. Thanks for listening. Hope you're all right. We'll talk to you next week with Skylar on a formulated interview. It's going to be great. All right.
generation. I've got a fire in my heart, I hope it reaches you.